What if the biggest decision in your AI roadmap isn't what to automate, but whether you should buy an agent platform or build your own? Welcome to Serious Talk. I'm your host, Greg Banks. Thanks for spending some time with us today. As we wrap up 2020, it has us reflecting on a really busy year. One dominant character stands out: AI. AI headlines have been nonstop, but the real conversations inside companies are about cost, control, and time to value. Today, I'm joined by two people who live this every day: Tim Harding, our COO, and Nancy Roller, an AI agent developer here at Serious Solutions. In this episode, we walk through a true apples-to-apples comparison, creating a customer-facing agent using Salesforce Agentforce plus Data Cloud versus building a custom agent end-to-end, using the same scenario and the same evaluation framework. Here's what you'll get out of today: a practical way to approach the decision of buy versus build, the often overlooked considerations of procurement complexity and ongoing operational cost, and a clearer path to match the decisions to your team's skills, stack, and risk tolerance. Let's get into it. Tim and Nancy, welcome to the show. Great to have you both here today.
Hey, Greg. Glad to be here.
Hey, Greg.
As we head to the end of this year, 2025 has had a lot of milestones, and it's just natural to look back and think about the events of this year. I got my LinkedIn recap this morning. I got my Spotify recap early in the year. But as I think about Serious Talk, it feels like we should have called this thing AI Talk. It has just been a year of nonstop headlines, and to reflect back on all the details of that, it's kind of hard to consume. And as I sit where I am today, I feel like the vocabulary, I feel like the features, I think a lot of things in the last few months have really settled down is not the right word, but we feel like we got a good grounding on that. But costing is an area that I feel like is still really gray. People have a hard time trying to understand where to go from there. Tim, I don't know what all you get on the docket today, but what are your thoughts about AI wrapping up the year?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Greg. And really excited for the topic we got lined up today, kind of doing an apples to apples comparison of how we could tackle a business use case that we think is applicable to a lot of different businesses out there. But how we could tackle that either using a Agentforce, Salesforce Agentforce and Data Cloud approach. So kind of using a pre-built agent framework, out-of-the-box framework, versus just building a custom agent and piecing together various tech stack pieces to do a true custom application or AI agent solution. It's something a lot of businesses talk to us about all the time. Like, is it worth it for me to pay for this agent framework or this agent tooling, or is it worth it for me to just go build something kind of out of the box? Do I do it DIY? Do I go with something a little bit more pre-built? And so, excited to kind of walk through this use case. We picked a use case with Terrapin Pet Care. Nancy will share kind of what the business use case is here in just a bit to get the audience up to speed. But we decided to kind of run the full gamut on this. And to do a true apples to apples comparison, we built a fully fleshed out kind of use case vignette. We then went ahead and did the full estimation process on how we would estimate for a project, whether we were building it with our Salesforce Agentforce Agents as a Service team for Agentforce and Data Cloud, or whether we were building it as a custom agent solution from our Agent AI Labs team. And so went through the full estimation process for both. And then we kind of made a comparison framework across a few different key assessment areas or evaluation criteria, 5 to be exact: solution fit, technical feasibility, procurement complexity, implementation costs, and operational costs, to try to give kind of a straightforward comparison between those. And we scored each one kind of from 0 to 5 in each of those domains and came out with a result. And we're excited to kind of walk everybody through these. So if you're on the fence, you're not sure, okay, do I go with something like Agentforce? Maybe it's another framework too, like Crew AI or AutoGen. Or do I go build my own custom agent with OpenAI SDK or Claude Agent SDK or something like that, Pydantic AI? Hopefully this evaluation can maybe give you some good things to chew on and maybe some key factors to consider. They're going to be specific for your business. And our hope is to have some really good takeaways at the end of it. So yeah, really excited for it. I guess first we'll jump in. Nancy, maybe you want to walk through Terrapin Pet Care. What's the business use case we're trying to solve for, and what are we comparing kind of solutions for?
Thanks, Tim. Terrapin Pet Care is a direct-to-consumer pet wellness company. They provide things like food subscriptions, supplements, add-ons. They also have an optional televet type of service, and they will be operating largely out of a chat widget or a mobile in-app assistant. Some of the things that we factored in as a part of our solution are that it should be able to surface information from an FAQ if the consumer asks a question. Also, if the consumer wishes to make some changes to their account, change their address or phone number, some small minor changes, they're able to do that with the agent. They're also able to change a ship date or skip a ship date, add a one-time item. And then certainly, last but not least, is the ability to hand off to a live agent or begin the case process.
Yeah. No, I think, we liked this use case because it's applicable just to a lot of different business models in that it's customer facing. It's got a bit of a sales aspect. It's got a bit of a service aspect. It's got to touch multiple systems, and it's got to be grounded in company information. So it had a few key components that we thought just makes it applicable to a lot of different businesses. So hopefully this kind of gives a really good view, and maybe if you're listening, you can find some parallels to your business in terms of thinking around, do I go Agentforce or do I go custom? Yeah, I guess I'll just start out. So we decided to divide and conquer here. I took the custom agent route, went through the full estimation process of how I would approach this for a customer. Then Nancy took the Agentforce and Data Cloud route, but kind of just give everybody a sense of kind of how we'd approach each one. For the custom agent, from a very high level, for something like this, we'd look at finding a really sound agent open source framework to base around. And kind of two of the main ones we see is like Claude Agent SDK or Pydantic AI. I picked Pydantic AI for this one as our agent framework. It's very flexible. You can bolt on lots of tools with it. We use really common protocols like MCP and Fast API to be able to connect it through integrations with the various systems that it would need to do. And then we would use a very robust and available open source tooling for both crawling websites for information on the company FAQ, as well as chunking and embedding your RAG pipeline. We use Crawl for AI and Docklane, and we can put kind of links to different things here as we share kind of the episode notes with this as well. We'd have to layer in some observability, so we'd have to make some decisions on what tooling we would use for that. We'd use something like LaneFuse or Sentry, and then we'd have to deploy this to some type of cloud-based infrastructure or hosting service. And so we picked Render for this one. It's something we use with a lot of other customers. It's very cost effective, but also has really solid uptime and very strong performance. Some key design decisions here too. We're doing a single agent architecture for this, but with very well-defined tooling. And so the agent knows when to call what. And we're going to use existing REST APIs that already exist across Terrapin's tech stack for subscriptions and orders. So we're not going to have to build backend for that. And then we're going to assume that Terrapin has some type of existing chat interface on their website, like Intercom. So we're able to or a 5.9 that we're able to integrate with that and expose the agent through that. And then we're going to use a model, kind of a higher cost model here, like a Claude Sonnet 4.5 or Opus 4.5. Because we want it to have superior tool calling accuracy. So those were some of the key decisions and kind of general approach that we use for the custom agent. Yeah, Nancy, what'd you come up with on the Agentforce side?
Well, with Agentforce sitting inside of Salesforce and it being contained within that piece of software, it's more about making decisions on SKUs that you need to work with to execute the solution. So in this case, we'd be looking at Service Cloud if they don't already have it, introducing a service agent for the customer chat, using Data Cloud to crawl the FAQ, and digital engagement for messaging on the web and an app, and then of course Experience Cloud plus an external identity for customer login. It all sits kind of inside the same house. It's a little bit smaller tech stack than what you described and fewer decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of going through our evaluation criteria. So again, we compared these now. We went through full estimation on these, determined level of effort, and then we scored them on solution fit, technical feasibility, procurement complexity, implementation costs. So that'd be your initial greenfield implementation, what you'd have to spend there, and then ongoing operational costs, including both services and the software. So the services to maintain it if you have to outsource it, plus the tooling required to keep it running. So let's start at solution fit. Kind of where'd you land on the Agentforce side for solution fit, Nancy?
I took a look and I made a base assumption when I was documenting what I wanted to do with this customer. If Terrapin already runs its customer experience on Salesforce and the use case that they desire fits inside of the agentic model in Salesforce, this is an absolute perfect fit. There's still some work to do. It's not just an out-of-the-box solution. So when we're talking about scoring, out of the box with no configuration would be a 5. And this is not a 5, it's a 4.5. And I feel like that's a fair estimation of the labor it would take to get this stood up.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I actually landed a very similar spot. So we actually kind of end up out in a tie here for solution fit. I had 0.5 as well for the custom agent. Again, I think this is a very strong solution fit. The tech stack that we've got picked, kind of either route here, will absolutely be able to meet the business requirements the business is looking for. Again, what would be a 5 here though? When I'm thinking 5 for solution fit, I'm thinking like, okay, there's already some pre-built solution that's geared towards a pet care business that does exactly what you're looking at doing. And that's the case with either of these. They're platforms or a conglomerate of platforms that absolutely are capable of doing the use case across the board of meeting requirements there, but it's going to take work to do that. And so I think that's kind of what bumped them both down to 4.5. So we're at a tie so far for solution fit. Moving to technical feasibility, where'd you end up with that one?
Well, Agentforce and Data Cloud natively support the required patterns. So if we're talking about things that they were looking for in their key intents, they need an FAQ, and that FAQ needs to be grounded on crawled web content that already exists. We can do that with Data Cloud. An auth-gated account and subscription action via Flow. You could use higher end automation for this if you really wanted to, but let's keep it simple and start with the flow. Case escalation would take place through omni-channel. And if they have an existing order or subscription API, you just hook into that. And you're looking really at a skilled Salesforce admin or an SI partner such as Sirius to help implement and operate the solution using standard Agentforce configuration flows. I'd like to stick with flows here, and Data Cloud connectors to do that crawl. Fairly straightforward.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. I ended up pretty close. I think we gave a slight edge, kind of looking at the custom agent option. I had custom agent scored at 4.5. I think same thing, like I think we've got the right tooling here to have this be a very feasible solution. I think kind of when we were discussing and comparing notes between the two and the approaches is you're just a little bit more hemmed in when you go with a framework like Agentforce or Data Cloud, where it's on paper based on what we know it's needed. Agentforce and Data Cloud, very technically feasible for this. But if something comes up that's outside the capabilities that are available, like our ability to customize are slightly lower than if you go with a custom agent. Now, again, we could still go with Lightning Web Components where needed or Apex where needed, but with a custom agent, we can go totally bespoke wherever we need to, or have access to thousands of other tools. If we decide like, okay, hey, we missed one piece, we got to add on this particular capability, we could go find a tool. We're not limited to the Salesforce ecosystem. So again, I think technically feasible. Both of them score very high. I think slight edge here goes to the custom agent with a 4.5 out of 5. So again, I think the only thing that would give a 5 here on this score would be, if there's something where it's like, it's a pre-built solution that already does it completely out of the box from day one. And there's this, in this use case, there's not something that does that today. So yeah, let's jump to procurement complexity, and I think this is where some bigger gaps start to appear, kind of in our evaluation. So where'd you end up on this one?
Well, with regard to the Agentforce piece, there's some SKUs to consider. I suspect my SKU list will be smaller than your SKU list, simply because everything resides inside of Salesforce for the most part. We're talking about Service Cloud if they don't already have it. We're talking about an Agentforce Service Agent, Data Cloud for the FAQ crawl, digital engagement for messaging, and Experience Cloud plus an external identity for customer login. Now, all of this stuff is managed inside of Salesforce, and you have the ability to see what you bought inside of Salesforce. So from that perspective, I graded it as a 4.75, just simply because everything kind of lives in one house. You're making decisions inside of one piece of software.
Yeah, and I think you have 4 SKUs, but on one platform. And if you're an enterprise company that already has a pretty complex procurement process, if you're already approved for the Salesforce platform, adding or removing additional SKUs, you kind of already get the guarantees of the Salesforce platform. You can kind of bypass a lot of complexities there. So for a lot of our larger customers or people from enterprise companies listening here, that could be a major advantage. So very low procurement complexity. I think, yeah, this is where custom agent, a gap kind of shows up here, a larger gap. I scored 2.5 for this one for the custom agent, because I think, on the low end, you're deciding not just between 10 different SKUs, but you're having to make at least 10 platform or infrastructure decisions on components that you would need to kind of piece together an end-to-end application or solution if you go with a custom route. Well, we kind of listed off a lot of the decisions that you'd have to make. You've got the chat interface, the agent framework, the LLM provider, the authentication provider, the database provider, caching, RAG pipeline, observability, deployment. So, and potentially more as you dive into it. Right? If you're a very flexible organization that can be very nimble at procurement and decision making, this probably isn't as big a barrier. But if you're a mid-commercial to enterprise-sized company where you've got stronger governance around procurement and what systems and tooling that you're using, this could be a significant barrier when you're kind of comparing both different options. Definitely something to think through. Yeah, so we got 4.75 again on the Agentforce agent route versus 2.5 here for the custom agent. So, all right, moving to implementation costs. So scoring 0 to 5, kind of with 5 being good, 0 being bad. Where do we kind of end up here on the spectrum looking over at the Agentforce route?
I remember looking at your estimate versus my estimate, and I know that my hours came in a little bit higher than yours did based on how you anticipate your developers are going to work, and I'll let you speak about that. That's yours. However, on the Agentforce side, the hourly cost of a Salesforce resource who has experience with Agentforce and does not live in the land of developers, so we're talking about a highly skilled Salesforce implementation person, would be less expensive per hour typically than a full stack developer would be. So I believe when we looked at the implementation hours and the cost, we ended up kind of having a very flat scale. My hours were higher, but my costs were lower, and your hours were lower, but your hourly cost was higher.
Right.
So
Yep.
I placed myself as a 4 on this one. That seems pretty reasonable.
Yeah, I think we ended up at the same spot. I think the way we're approaching building custom AI agents, it's a very in-demand skill set right now. We use agentic coders, people with a strong agentic coding skill set. And so with that, on a per hour basis, it's going to be a higher cost resource. But with the efficiencies that you gain through agentic coding, you can really knock down a lot of hours. It really kind of ends up almost being a wash on the implementation cost side here. When you look at those, we kind of scored both at a 4 here for implementation costs. I think it's largely implementation costs are going to be pretty similar either route you go. I don't think that's going to be a major decision factor between these. But then we move to operational costs. So this is another one where, again, maybe there's a wider gulf. And so where do you end up with operational costs? And again, we're looking at both potential ongoing services costs for like managed services or using a vendor to maintain your agent, as well as software costs. So what is it going to take to run the agent from a software perspective? So where do we end up on the Agentforce side?
I ended up going a little more cautious on this piece of scoring. Agentforce uses flex credits as our consumption currency, and how credits are consumed can depend on the complexity that you're facing here. So cost curve is driven by volume, complexity, and channel mix. Heavier RAG, longer responses, and more tool calls will use more credits and cost more money. Everything is housed in one place, so flex credits exist inside of Salesforce, and you can keep an eye on these, so the luxury of having it all in one spot is great, but the cost may be higher, I anticipate, than the custom model.
Yeah, and you're kind of paying for a middle person essentially. Like Agentforce is a wrapper, which adds some key components and reduces procurement complexity, but essentially it's an enterprise grade wrapper around LLMs that provides you reasoning capability, agent scripts, some other advantages there, but you're gonna have to pay for that wrapper, right? And so I think you have this extra little layer that you don't necessarily have with the custom agent route. So we landed kind of at the 3 on the Agentforce side. Yeah, looking over at custom agent, you're kind of cutting out the middleman. You're kind of cutting out the wrapper that you need around that. You got a lot of micro costs. So it's almost like death by 1,000 cuts on that side. But at the end of the day, when you actually look long term, we took a 5-year total cost of ownership view across both of them. You are looking at lower operational costs ongoing with a custom agent. And so we landed at a 4.5 out of 5, so scoring very well for operational costs on custom agent, scored at a 3 for the Agentforce agent route. So, All right. So that leads us to our overall evaluation of where we ended up. And I think the final score where we ended up is 4.1 out of 5 for Agentforce and 4.0 out of 5 for the custom agent. And so I think pretty much, I think either one could be a viable option. And I think some key takeaways that we saw here when we kind of looked at this, like we weren't actually sure where it would end up when we did this analysis. So, and we kind of worked independently when I worked on the custom route versus Nancy worked on the Agentforce route. So it was pretty interesting to see they ended up the same. But I think it ultimately comes down to specific businesses and what you're prioritizing. Every business is going to prioritize one or more of these evaluation criteria more than others. And so where did we have the biggest gaps between them? I think procurement complexity and operational costs were the two biggest gaps. In terms of implementation cost, technical feasibility, solution fit, I think both of these are very viable. I don't think any one of those three would be a true deciding factor. But if you're looking at procurement complexity, like what type of governance do we have? What can we get approved within our business? What's feasible to move with quickly if we need to start getting business value and business results? Procurement complexity was a big gulf. We had 4.75 versus 2.5 for the Agentforce agent. But then the other big one is operational costs. Like implementation, I think you're probably pretty similar. But ongoing operational costs, if you're trying to shave the ongoing cost down as much as possible, I think you're definitely have some advantages going with the custom agent route versus Agentforce. So I think it really depends what you weight. I think one other thing that kind of came to mind that's not really reflected well in our evaluation criteria for me, Nancy, curious on your thoughts too, is just what's the skill sets of your current team? Like if you already have a strong Salesforce team, and so you don't have to go hire or get a vendor for that Salesforce work, or you have a Salesforce team that's already good at working with Salesforce vendors and have a strong relationship there, that could definitely skew you more towards, an Agentforce route versus, if you have a really strong custom development team, especially if this team's strong in REST API, Fast API integrations and strong in Python, then a custom agent route can potentially be a lot more feasible there too. So I think you have to look at like the existing skills on your team too, and your existing tech stack. Kind of what's about strategic fit. But yeah, I guess what were some of your takeaways and thoughts from your end, Nancy?
100% agree on the tech stack piece. One of the assumptions that I made, of course, is that Terrapin is currently using Salesforce. If they weren't using Salesforce, I don't know that this would be my recommendation. I'd probably look at what their tech stack was and if they had any wish to go to a Salesforce model. If everything is sitting on a different series of platforms and it all kind of is already hooked together separately, you'll definitely want to go to the customer route for that, because introducing Agentforce at that stage would probably not make as much sense, and it would drive up the cost to try to make it work inside of that
Right.
system. Yeah.
And I think it carries over to make it applicable as many businesses as possible. Like if it's not Salesforce, if you have a different CRM today, and that CRM, whether it's HubSpot or, if you're on the Microsoft side of the house with Dynamics, then their agent frameworks probably make a lot of sense if you're already on that CRM. So I think you really have to heavily determine the tech stack that you're on. Hey, we just picked Salesforce. We know Salesforce. But replace Salesforce with any CRM that you're actively on right now. Most of them are, ServiceNow. Most of them are making pretty big pivots to offer agent frameworks or wrappers. So I think hopefully this is translatable to any one of those wrappers or frameworks versus custom. So yeah, again, key takeaways. I think one of the things we want to kind of debunk is like whether it's ServiceNow, Salesforce, whatever, there's a lot of talk of like, oh, these kind of agent wrappers or frameworks are just way too expensive. Like, don't look at these. I think what our key takeaway is, it really depends on what you're prioritizing. Both can be very viable courses of action. I think you really got to look at strategic fit, procurement complexity, and ongoing operational costs. And of those three, which ones do you kind of weight the most heavily? In our eyes, especially when you're looking at Salesforce versus custom, implementation costs, technical feasibility, and solution fit, oftentimes aren't going to be key deciding factors. So always, it's everybody's favorite answer. The devil's in the details, and it depends. But hopefully we gave some like more focused areas to look at, and maybe where you might expect there to be a lot of differences, maybe showing a lot of the similarities and how well they scored and where they could both be viable courses of action. So yeah, it was a fun exercise to do on our end. Actually, it's something we've been talking about doing for a while, just doing we estimate both all the time for various use cases, but we've never done just a straight apples to apples comparison, doing the full estimate and then doing kind of I'd say qualitative evaluation assessment. I wouldn't say we were super quantitative here. We made some assumptions, but tried to make it as structured as possible to make it useful. Yeah, pretty interesting. And I think hopefully some good takeaways for the audience here.
Yeah, for sure. I want to throw a couple of surprises at you. I know these are not things that you put in your criteria, but just having spent a decade or more in the enterprise space, a couple other words come to my mind. One is security. For better or for worse, when everything's inside of Salesforce, you have that implied trust of you're not really going outside the platform a whole lot. Where on the custom side, getting all the pieces to talk to one another is one thing, but making sure all that communication between the platforms is secure. Tim, is that a meaningful thing to call out? Is another cost or decision or maintenance that you'd have to worry about?
I think we kind of baked that into our evaluation here in terms of that's where I had a lot more time dedicated towards kind of red teaming and governance and quality assurance testing on the custom agent side rather than the build itself, because you're able to actually build relatively quickly with agentic coding, the agent. But you're not using a structured platform like Salesforce that's enterprise grade. So we're planning extra time in the implementation there to account for that. And that's, I think, where the implementation costs kind of balanced out. So I think it kind of gets baked in. That has to be a major consideration either way you go, whether you go Agentforce or whether you go custom agent. You got to make sure it's a secure solution. You got to make sure if you're talking across systems that you're putting the proper governance in place, that it's been thoroughly tested and vetted. So I think although it wasn't called out as a specific evaluation criteria, I think we accounted for that in this, in that it kind of makes its difference. Obviously the custom agent route maybe has a little bit higher risk there because you're not dealing with one enterprise grade platform or solution. But then you got to make up for that in your implementation and making sure that you're vetting, putting good governance structure in place, doing solid QA, red hatting, et cetera, throughout your implementation.
Fair enough. The other one that I was thinking, but you kind of spoke to it there as well, was just kind of troubleshooting, right? If you've got 4, 5, 6, 7 platforms and a problem comes up, if it's inside of Salesforce, you can kind of, worst case, you have to go to Salesforce for that advanced support. Or on the custom side, you might have to go into others. But the flip side is in the custom solutions, they may have a more robust set of power tools that you can troubleshoot yourself and not have to lean on that. So I think that's tomato. There's a lot of ways to go at that. For those listening, right, this is a lot of words. This is a lot of criteria. We may just name this episode, It Depends, because it does. But I do want to call out, there's an artifact that we're going to share coming out of this. We want people to kind of be able to look back and see into the weeds of how we graded each of these and what this looks like. So if you're sitting in your own shop and you're trying to make these decisions and you go, man, that sounded really great, I don't know what to do with it. We've got an artifact that'll be linked in the show notes. So you can go back and take a look at this. And by all means, if a question comes up, there'll also be a link on how to contact us here at Sirius to help you talk through those questions. Guys, I feel like I just took a PhD course. For those who don't do implementation, this is a very common practice, right? You have to consider all these things. But I really appreciate you, Nancy and Tim, not just taking the easy route at a very, very high altitude, not thinking of those things. I think the 5-year approach with very specific things called out in the vignette are going to make this a more applicable lesson to walk away with. So thank y'all for your time. But any closing thoughts today, Tim?
No, good on our end. It was a fun discussion, fun exercise. So appreciate the time.
All right, Nancy, thank you for being on here today and helping cover the other side of it. Appreciate y'all's expertise and experience on this.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Y'all. Wow, what a great exercise to contemplate on your winding road of AI considerations. If this Agentforce versus custom solution breakdown helped you think more clearly about your own AI roadmap, do me a favor. Follow or subscribe to Serious Talk wherever you're listening and leave a quick review. It genuinely helps the show reach more listeners, developers, and leaders like yourself. What are the next steps? Here's your call to action. Pick one customer-facing use case in your organization, maybe a support portal, subscription management, or maybe an order submission portal. Then run it through these same 5 criteria we use today: solution fit, technical feasibility, procurement complexity, implementation cost, and operational cost. All 5 of these are very significant elements of your total cost of ownership. If you do that honestly, your answer becomes a lot less of "it depends" and a lot more actionable. If you need any help with that exercise, please reach out to us. Share this episode with one person on your team who's weighing buy versus build right now. And check the show notes for links to the artifact we used for today's exercise. You'll also find other recommended resources and links from today's conversation. Lastly, you'll find links to connect with us here at Sirius for more information, links to other episodes, or any assistance we can offer to help you on your AI journey. Thanks again for listening today, and a special thank you to Jason Fowler for letting us use his song Mystery Road. See you next time.